Hey everybody, today I'm gonna show you some very easy sketchbook ideas. I'm using Karen markers for all of them. Those are the Karen brush markers, and this video is sponsored by Karen markers. And I've really enjoyed using them for many months. It's been well over a year now. And I just wanted to do something super easy, fun, doodly, colorful for this video. So I'm going to show you several sketchbook page ideas that are just something that you can do in between projects or just to loosen up, or if you're a beginner, those are really good. You can see that I've already started with the first one, and I just put down a few outlines, and then I used some water and I just blended that stuff in. Then I used another pen and went over the wet parts. I'm gonna do a lot of different textures and doodles with this one. The point here is just to experiment, just to have fun. You don't have to go in with a clear plan or anything. But what I would recommend is picking out a color scheme so you don't go completely overboard with your colors. And also something that I did here is kind of doing a gradient. So I started with the pink, then moved into my yellow, orange tones, and then I went into a green tone that faded into a blue tone, and then the warmer blue tone blended kind of or faded into the pink again. You will see how that looks in just a minute or so. So that's just something that I would keep in mind, to not go completely overboard with the colors. Of course, there's no rules and you can just use this for experimentation. I'm really happy with the colors that I picked for this. I actually used those same colors for all of the illustrations that I'm gonna show you today because I really liked this color scheme. And I do have the big box of the markers, but honestly, you don't need every single color in the world all the time to create amazing pieces. I would say if you have a big set of a certain art supply, then it's always a good idea to just pick a few colors beforehand and kind of stick to that color scheme. So that just makes your life easier. Of course, if I notice that something is missing, I allow myself to add a certain color in later as well. It's not like that is a rule set in stone. But honestly, this time I was really happy with the colors that I chose, and I just wanted to have fun. I have been focusing more on more elaborate illustrations that take a little bit more time, and I feel like I'm getting back to a point where I just needed something simple in between, something low pressure, and I enjoyed this so much. I had so much fun with every single one of the illustrations that I'm doing here in this video. So if you feel a little bit art blocked, a little bit stuck, then this is a really good idea for you to just experiment like that. You don't have to do a lot of different shapes either, because honestly, in the past, when I've done doodly pages like that, I always had the pressure of coming up with different kinds of shapes because I wanted a lot of variation. And for some reason, I thought I just have to be super inventive and I have to come up with so many different things. But this time I asked myself, why not repeat the same shapes over and over again? It really doesn't matter. So I did a bunch of circles, I did a bunch of random shaped blobs, and I was really not trying to reinvent the wheel here or do something super out of the box. I was just trying to have fun and loosen up and play with the colors, and also just play with the water a little little bit. These markers blend fairly well with water. It really depends on the paper that you're using. Here I am using a bit of a rougher watercolor sketchbook. You can kind of see the texture of the paper even on camera. So here the colors don't blend as much. With a paper that has less texture, I found that they blend even more. Here they sit a little bit, but they still blend. It really depends on that. But honestly, I don't mind either way. You just have to know your medium and you have to use it to its best abilities and make the best out of whatever you're using. And by the way, if you are interested in the Karen markers, I will try my best to leave links to everything in the description box below. Also the other tools that I'm using. Check out the links there and maybe get a starter set with the Karen markers or treat yourself to the full box. Either way, they're really fun and I love playing around with them. You can see now I'm doing these kinds of outline dots and I'm now breaking the gradient a little bit. So you can see what I mentioned previously, that I did the pinks more on the right with the yellow and oranges, which went into the green, the blue, this kind of gradient. And now I'm breaking it apart a little bit with tiny dots and stuff in between just to make the page look a little bit more interesting. But those are the smaller shapes. Those are not the big main shapes. Also, I'm doing a lot of these tiny circles and dots, really not pressuring myself into doing something super creative, just repeating the same thing over and over again, which kind of becomes meditative and really fun, but it's still different enough so it doesn't get too boring. If I were to do the exact same thing all the time, it wouldn't be as fun. I found that this specific page had a really good mixture. Here I'm currently using the dark blue color more in the pink and orange section. And this is what I mean when I say I'm breaking the gradient a little bit. But just with those tiny details, the main colors are still kind of in the order that I had previously. And that's kind of how I got a balance of colors that I really liked. And honestly, this is a little bit hit or miss. If you're experimenting with this, you might get something that you like, you might get something that you don't like as much. This is really something that could go either way. But just try something. If you don't like it, I mean, it's not that big of a deal. Just consider it something fun and something you can do in between. I've done more abstract pages like that I didn't like, so that could also be part of it. But it is something where you can just loosen up. And I just kept on going with this page. I kept on adding more and more details and textures until I thought this is enough. I don't want to add any more. I don't want to overdo it. But even if you do overdo it, there's always a next time, a next illustration, and you learn from every single one that you do. And here I just stopped every few steps, every other color, asked myself, do I want to add more? And yeah, I'm really happy with how it turned out. And because I liked the color scheme so much, I again used the same color scheme for every illustration. And for the one on the left, I wanted to do an even simpler one. I wanted something that is not as busy as the page on the right because I want the pages to kind of work together. This is something that I consider in my sketchbooks. I really like having these double page spreads that kind of work together. And so it makes a lot of sense to reuse the same colors on the other side as well, because then they fit together. And also, if the page on the right has a lot of information, a lot of details, and is really busy like we have here, then I'm trying to make the one on the left just a little bit simpler. It is still pretty busy. I don't know if it's my favorite page spread ever. Honestly, the one on the left could have been even simpler than I did, but it is okay. I wanted to repeat the same shape over and over again with this one, and so I did stars, and then I also did these kind of circles. It's not perfect circles, just these rounded lines everywhere, and that was just to add a little bit more texture, more variety to it. But other than that, I only did stars, and then I did a background to kind of ground all of that, because the page on the right is also really busy. I thought that a dark background on the left one would kind of help the two pages to stand out and give a little bit of contrast between the two pages. So you will see me adding a background shortly. And here I also played around with adding some water, just blending everything a little bit. And then when I added in the background, at first I tried to not have it bleed into the foreground, but then it happened in one spot accidentally. And for some reason, I liked it. I liked the way that looked. I liked the way that the ink flowed. And so I kept on doing that and kept on painting on these edges where the stars were still wet. And you can see that we have this blooming effect. You can also get a similar effect like that with watercolors. I just found it really fascinating the way that the inks performed in that specific scenario. Those are kind of watercolor inks, I would say. I have no idea how these are made, but they look so cool when they blend like that. And so I just kept on doing that on purpose. And not every star has these bleeding edges, because of course some were already dry when I added the background. But I like that variety. Some of those are kind of sharp and the other ones are a little bit bled into the background. If you don't like this messy look, of course, then wait in between the layers, wait until your stars are dry and then add the background. Or you could also add the background with a different kind of medium if you want to. You could use paint for that. I've done that in the past too. Or you could do it just like I did here, or you could really have it bleed even more. Experiment with that however you want to. These are more messy pages than anything. Just playing around with the paints, no pressure. This does not have to be a masterpiece. And those were the kinds of things that I was telling myself. And here is the finished page spread while the ink was still wet. So the streaks that you can still see blended after they dried. And for the next one, I am again bringing out this coloring book. I have used that several times in the past, and I really wanted to get back to that one. I keep on going back to that one. It's really fun. So I really recommend getting coloring books that inspire you. And I copied one of the pages and I transferred it onto a big sketchbook that I had. And you can see here I used a really hard pencil for the transfer and a soft one on the other side. It shifted a little bit in the transferring process, so it's not a perfect circle anymore. I feel like that happens most of the time when I use this technique. And I also kept on going back and kind of getting rid of some more of the lead of the pencil because I didn't want it to bleed into my markers too much. But with this one, I also had a lot of fun because I was just coloring it in, honestly. It's like doing a coloring page, just the same thing if you transfer it like that. And you can just do this very low pressure coloring in. And I just kind of spread out the colors in a way that looked good or fun. And I ditched the green for this one. Every other color is the same from all of the other illustrations. I just felt that it didn't need that many colors, so I got rid of the green in this one. And again, I just spread the colors. There was no reason or plan behind where each color went. It was just what I was feeling in the moment, and I didn't perfectly repeat those colors either. You can make this very symmetrical if you want to. You can make every butterfly the same, or whatever coloring page you are using. I'm sure that most of you watching actually have coloring books lying around, and alternatively, you could also use the pens directly in the coloring book if you don't want to transfer it out. I'm sure that would work as well. These markers are water-based, so if you have a coloring book that has fairly good paper, it doesn't even have to be watercolor paper. It could just be one that's not super thin. Most likely will not bleed to the next page. I just, for some reason, felt more like doing it on this watercolor paper. This is not the best watercolor paper either. This is a sketchbook that I got a long time ago. This brand sent it to me, and I haven't used it in a long time because it's just a little bit big for me, and the paper is not incredible either, but it's not bad either. It's just a little bit too thin for my watercolor and gouache paintings. But for something like that, it worked really well. And because I didn't blend the markers with water here either, I just used them as is. And you can see that they have very little streakiness. For being watercolor markers, or water-based markers rather, they don't have a lot of streakiness because they do blend into the paper. I don't know how else to describe it, but the only issue you might have is that they might even bleed a little bit too much depending on the surface or paper that you're using. So here I am kind of going back, and I'm adding back in this black outline that my coloring page would have had anyways. And I'm doing that last so I could get these crisp lines, because I felt like it kind of needed that. It looked a little bit too frayed and messy. But I mean, I knew that I would go in and add the outlines, so I wasn't incredibly careful with the coloring either. And this is what it looked like in the end. For some more fun and creative sketchbook ideas, check out this video next.